There was a New York Times Siena College poll about our people. And it was something that I thought was incredibly interesting. And I can kind of explain it from the Florida perspective because it's different here in Miami. Miami Cubans have overwhelmed the population. They feel like they are, well, they are numerically the majority. So they already resonate, especially the white Cubans, with being white, just like my wife, who is paler in complexion than her husband, who's talking to you right now. So I'm curious for you, this New York Times Siena College poll said, which of the following comes closer to your view when Donald Trump talks about problems with immigration?
Mhm.
And we were talking about this just a second ago. Hispanic respondents that were born in the US, almost 70% of them said, I don't feel like he's talking about me. But I said, he is talking about the proverbial you. He's talking about the person that looks like you, that is back in Venezuela, in Cuba, wherever it is, that wants to come to this country, is trying to have family come to this country. So put a bow on this for me. When you were in Arizona and you were talking about immigration, and I can't imagine you were talking about this New York Times Siena College poll, but are you hearing a little bit of that when it comes to immigration overall as a topic that some Latinos are just maybe not identifying? It's not resonating as much for them. The empathetic or sympathetic immigrant story just doesn't resonate with them, and they just want the border to be secure and people to go through the same processes that they went to get here. What were you hearing on the ground?
This is such a complicated and nuanced. We could do a whole pod, I
I
think,
know.
just on this. It is complicated. It is really complicated. And I think that it is really complicated because, we always say Latinos are not a monolith. I think that really started like a few elections ago. Like voting groups are not monoliths. Depending on where you come from, depending on where your family arrived and how long ago, that can definitely shift your perception of, what that is looking like. So, you have families that might immigrated to Latino majority areas. Thinking places in Florida, for example, or California or Texas, even New York, they're going to have a much different perception of what this looks like and what community means for them, in a social way, but also in a political sense as well, than folks who, maybe are in more rural areas or are in different areas, or are in Latino majority areas in rural areas, which is like kind of an area that I grew up in. Um, it's really complicated. I think that I have heard, some folks say I had to do it one way, other people should have to do it that way too. I've heard people say, there should be empathy. This is a different situation. Um, I've heard people say that they just don't resonate with the issue at all. They don't care about immigration. They're concerned about healthcare. They're concerned about inflation, education, like a lot of other issues. So I think that it is really complicated. There's a lot of nuance into how people develop their stances on immigration, I think particularly within the Latino and Hispanic community. Um, and there's really not just one way to completely, I think, target that audience. And I don't know if that is something that makes sense for political. I don't run political campaigns, so I don't, that's got to be incredibly complicated and difficult, especially when it comes to, you're putting out a message, you are putting out an ad, you are making a statement, you are giving a policy position that at the end of the day is going to be broad, is not going to be niche, is not going to be specific. And I think, folks will either identify with that or not, or they'll find their own way to identify with that or not. But it is very personal and it is very complicated.